USAID, that's that organization that Elon Musk is just taking to Pound Town. USAID funneled millions to Black Lives Matter through the George Soros-backed Tides Center. Ooh, follow the money. That's what we're doing. This story has come back up because as USAID is in the center of this hurricane of basically having all of its funding pulled because it's ridiculous, this is a storyline that I actually benefited from during Chop and Chaz. Let me tell you how. Let's get into it. So here's a clip that I started this story with. It's from Jonathan Cho here in Seattle, Discovery Institute. Starting to follow the USAID money trail in the Seattle area. The Tides/Soros Foundation gave a lot of money to the campaign of Chesa Boudin, the now recalled district attorney in San Francisco. Tides got millions from USAID. Chesa called organization drug dealers in victims. Thank you at Doge. So Jonathan Cho here is basically calling out this, the following the money. And Chesa Boudin, probably one of the worst district attorneys ever. And even in liberal bastion of San Francisco, they said, no. Now, if you're not familiar with Chesa Boudin, his parents were convicted of murder, spent decades and decades in prison. He basically grew up visiting his parents in prison. So he has a slightly different outlook on life, especially criminal reform. And let's just watch this quick video.
Drugs at a stash house in the East Bay. That kind of police to focus their resources on upstream activity. I was really heartened to see last night that the police made an arrest that involved seizing $50,000 in drug sales profits and large volumes of drugs at a stash house in the East Bay. That kind of law enforcement effort is far more likely to make a difference than the arrests that we see every single day of people who are themselves addicted on the street corners in the Tenderloin. But we need to also recognize that a significant percentage of people selling drugs in San Francisco, perhaps as many as half, are here from Honduras. And
Honduras, illegally here from Honduras, illegally selling drugs in our communities. Keep that in mind. Killing members of our communities, okay?
Many of them have been trafficked from Honduras. And we need to be.
And trafficking was happening at this point in time wide open because we had a wide open southern border. Weird. A wide open southern border where not only the drug dealers, but the drugs themselves could just come right up. I mean, this isn't tough to figure out.
Be mindful about the impacts our interventions have and about how those interventions can be effective. Some of these young men have been trafficked here under pain of death. Some of them have had family members who have been in Honduras who have been or will be harmed if they don't continue to pay off the traffickers that brought them here. These are not idle threats. I can tell you from a young Honduran man who I personally represented when I was a public defender, who was accused of selling drugs and who was guilty of selling drugs and who eventually pled guilty to what he was accused of, that when he cooperated, years before I met him, when he cooperated with federal authorities in a different state, his father in Honduras was killed in retaliation. These are not idle threats, and we do not have them.
Nobody's saying they are idle threats, but do you want to allow illegal drug dealers into the country and just do their thing? He's basically defending drug dealers for coming in and, selling these drugs that killed my son. Simple as that. Simple as that. So are you okay with that? If you're okay with that, keep supporting George Soros, who, by the way, former President Biden, gave the highest civilian award to a guy who supports guys like this, who just allow illegal, alien, criminal drug dealers to come into our communities and spew death by selling fentanyl-laced drugs or fentanyl, straight up fentanyl. So if you're okay with that, keep voting blue because I'm sure it'll work out. It's a fit. Well, my YouTube channel got monetized at the beginning of right after Chop Chas kind of formulated. I went over there with a GoPro and filmed a bunch of stuff, and you guys saw it, and a lot of you have been following me ever since. So what happened there is that there was all kinds of ads being run back then through all these different entities. Nobody really knew what was going on. And so you had taxpayers' funds in the form of United States Agency International Development, that's USAID, right? United States Agency and International Development. So they're going to internationally develop Black Lives Matter. So they were spending money. They were doling out money as they do. They doled out money to the Tide Foundation, which is George Soros, which we know he's all about Black Lives Matter. He's all about justice reform. He's a billionaire. He's all about supporting these, Chesa Boudin being one of them, many dozens and dozens of district attorneys to try and change the way that our justice system works in the United States. Black Lives Matter believes in literally getting rid of borders, getting rid of the judicial system, getting rid of cops. That's why we had defund the police. All of that, just insanity, because they want to go down this road of, well, just get rid of it, get rid of borders, get rid of the court system, get rid of judges. But what they don't realize is they don't have anything in place to substitute. They say, well, we're going to invest into the community. All right. Okay. And when the bad man comes to your house specifically, who are you going to call? Well, there's no 911 anymore. We, in our geniusness, we decided that, defunding the police, ultimately getting rid of the police, getting rid of borders, getting rid of all that, stuff that we don't need because the man's holding us down. Maybe that's not going to work out because now there's no police system to call. It's just absolute insanity from that standpoint. So when I was at Chop and Chas, we were having all these ads run by entities like what we're talking about right here. That's literally who ran tons and tons and tons and tons and tons of ads on our content. They didn't know that I was a conservative podcaster. They didn't know I was a conservative YouTuber. They're just running ads out. The guy's covering Black Lives Matter. He must love Black Lives Matter. No, just money being dumped into the system. So we had some amazing, amazing runs because all this money was filtering through and they didn't care where it was being spent as long as it covered Black Lives Matter. Well, not all of us were covering Black Lives Matter from events from the standpoint of, hey, this is going great. I covered it from the standpoint of, hey, 2 black kids got murdered in a Black Lives Matter, quasi-sponsored event. Does that tell you anything? I mean, does that necessarily make sense? No, it doesn't. Antifa had their hand in it, and Antifa is the arm that I think is just basically, you're finding them in all of these. Anytime you have some kind of protest, you're going to find Antifa at the heart of it because they're a known quantity where these groups can send out their money and fund all of these protests. They've got the money. They've got literally millions. Let's follow the millions here. United States Agency for International Development issued a $24.7 million grant to the George Soros-funded Tides Center, who former President Biden, thank God, just gave an award to because he donated so much money to the Democrats. It's like, there you go. So George Soros funded Tide Center, which then funded millions of taxpayer dollars funds to the Black Lives Matter movement in 2020. Tides granted more than $12.6 million from its Black Lives Matter support fund to help support Black Lives Matter Grassroots during the height of the racial justice riots, Fentanyl Floyd riots, following the death of George Fentanyl Floyd in Minneapolis. Black Lives Matter Grassroots is an organization that works with local Black Lives Matter chapters and similar racial justice groups. So you've got Black Lives Matter Global, you've got Black Lives Matter local. Both of them are domestic terror organizations. And the reason I say that is you had roughly $5 billion in damages done to, what arguably could be stated, a lot of Black-owned businesses, because these riots happened in big blue Democratic cities. And the riots happened to Black-owned businesses. So this whole notion of, Black Lives Matter, I have yet to speak to a Black person that has benefited from anything Black Lives Matter has done. Not one person have I spoken to. Oh yeah, I got this money to fix it. I got this money. No, Discovery was revealed. We're talking about this line of money of funding. Discovery was revealed after Black Lives Matter Global Network Foundation sued the Tides Center. So global, meaning different entity than local, sued the Tides Center in California court last year, accusing the nonprofit of withholding $33 million in donations to the foundation. Hey, you said you were going to give us all this money to go out and do our debauchery, and you didn't. We were going to burn down some more Black-owned businesses, but now we're not because you withheld the funding. Tides was forced to issue a clarification that the funds were intended for Black Lives Matter Grassroots. Local. Oh, okay. All right. Which is a distinct organization separate from Black Lives Matter Global Network funding, whatever that is. Yeah. And other racial justice groups. Tides, which manages roughly $1.4 billion in assets, said the amount awarded was $12.6 million. According to an issue statement from Bloomberg, this Black Lives Matter anti-police racial justice riots, mostly peaceful, but yeah, that whole little issue of the $5 billion in damage and, the two Black kids, one was 19, one was 16 in Seattle, got murdered. Yeah, I don't want to talk about that because it just doesn't look good. And that's from all the other people that were impacted by, taking over a multi-block area in Seattle. I mean, it was just Looney Tunes. It was nuts. But who funds that? That's what we're looking at. You do. You do. You do through USAID. You do. That's not good. So, Black Lives Matter anti-police racial justice riots caused billions of dollars worth of damage to cities across the U.S. in 2020 and in 2021. I mean, how much money was spent in Portland alone, not only on supporting all those riots, the nightly riots? I mean, millions and millions of dollars. But then you got to put the city back together, and the city still isn't back together. Portland is still not back together. It's a slow get it back together because you've got a bunch of nut jobs running around. And you know what? People don't want to run businesses in areas that were impacted like downtown Portland was. I mean, the findings resurfaced after Trump's new Department of Government Efficiency, Doge, headed by Elon Musk, took a wrecking ball to USAID this week. Doge revealed that the government agency has been spending billions of taxpayers' dollars on outlandish expenses, such as $2 million for sex changes in Guatemala. $2 million for sex changes in Guatemala. Why are we supporting sex changes in Guatemala? I mean, honestly, what? We've got $20 million on a children's TV show in Iraq. All right. I've got nothing against children's shows. I've got nothing against children's shows in Iraq. But why are we funding them? Well, because they've probably got some kind of angle, right? $7.9 million to teach Sri Lankan journalists how to avoid binary gendered language. Sri Lanka? Sri Lanka. Wait, Sri Lanka binary gendered language. What? That makes no sense. You know what I mean? These are these issues. So is it a stretch that your taxpayers' money went to George Soros Foundation and he spent it on a bunch of left-wing nonsense? No, it's not a stretch at all. This is literally what's happening. You always hear about, people always make snarky remarks on YouTube. Follow the money. Just got to follow the money. Be all real clear. But it's so convoluted. It is so convoluted until Elon Musk comes in and goes, yep, no. $6 million for advancing LGBTQ issues in priority countries around the world. And the list goes on. You know, where's the money for the, if you're going to go down far left, you got to fund the far right. Where's all the money for the Proud Boys? I'm just saying, this is news for reasonable people. This isn't news for, nut jobs. So you got to balance it out. Where's that balance? There is no balancing. There is no balancing, and that's why it's important to know that how many billions, if not trillions of dollars have been spent of your taxpayer money on these kind of causes. And that is how Black Lives Matter was able to basically raise that awareness after the whole George Floyd thing to the point where it was a massive, massive, massive campaign. And that momentum, I believe, that is what put in place Biden winning the election in 2020. In 2020. It was this, thing happening. It was just absolute nuts. And this is where the funding came from. Came from you. You feel good about that? No, I don't either. Fiscal year 2024, the USAID received $44 billion in funding from Congress. $44 billion. Stephen Miller, Trump's deputy chief of staff, described the USAID as a funding mechanism for the radical left. 100% agreed. Because there's no funding for the radical right. There's no funding for the right at all. No. Trump administration is moving to permanently shut down the agency. Elon Musk wrote in an X post on Sunday, USAID is a criminal organization. Time for it to die. Oof. Yeah. Now, does this mean that everybody's just, we're all set and we're all good? They'll come up with other ways to make this happen. I mean, they're going to continue funding. They've just been using your taxpayers' dollars in addition to, generous donors to the Democratic Party like George Soros. Here's going back to Chesa Boudin. This is how the money goes, right? Listen to this. Parents guilty of murder and raised by radicals. Chesa Boudin in San Francisco's next district attorney. Just a quick article, and we're going to go through it. This is how that money gets into the hands of people who are just literally not good for America. They're not good for society. They're not good for justice. They're good for their own agenda, which is so limited in scope that they don't understand or they don't care how much they're impacting people by going down this whole justice reform thing. In 1981, when Chesa Boudin was 14 months old, his parents, members of the radical and violent Weather Underground, left him with a babysitter so they could take part in an armed car robbery, became one of New York's most notorious botched heists, a crime that left 2 police officers and a Brinks guard dead in a New York suburb. 38 years later, Boudin is set to become San Francisco's top prosecutor with help of a lot of funding through your taxpayers' dollars. We know the chain. In a matter of weeks, he will be sworn in as the city's district attorney, the latest in a line of prosecutors seen as criminal justice reformers. What does that mean? That means they don't prosecute. They don't put anybody in prison. They basically don't do their jobs because they see the criminal justice reform system. It should be eliminated. That's what Black Lives Matter believes. It should be eliminated. It should be eliminated. Well, so take that to the next step. Just don't really do your job. Don't prosecute. And that's where we end up, to the point that even a liberal environment like San Francisco says, wait a minute, we got too many criminals running around. You're not doing your job. And they recalled him. Literally, they recalled him. Like his peers on the left, Boudin ran on a platform of ending mass incarceration. Should work out fine. Just let everybody out of the prisons. It'll be fine. Look at how Venezuela is handling that. Yeah, now we got Tren de Aragua running around in El Salvador offering to help us imprison illegals that other countries aren't taking back. So we got mass incarceration, eliminating cash bail. That's working out splendidly. Creating a unit to review wrongful convictions. whatever. And refusing to cooperate with Immigration Customs Enforcement, or ICE. Refusing to cooperate with ICE. That's one of their big deals. That's why you're seeing this pushback with Tom Homan right now, as well as prosecuting ICE agents who violate so-called sanctuary city laws. This has been going on for way before Trump became president in 2024 and started enacting his program of securing our border. 90% of the illegal crossings are no longer happening at the southern border. 90%. Crossings are down 90%. Huh. So all that notion of, it just didn't get that, legislation through and Republicans are to blame because they said no. How about just not dismantling all of Trump's stuff on the border? What about all that? What about the Remain in Mexico policy? Could have kept that up. The 94 executive actions that you took? Do you think that might have had something to do with opening up the southern border? I think so. He also wants to move the district attorney's office away from prosecuting prostitution. Okay, all right. And minor quality of life crimes to focus instead on taking on corporations and prioritizing the most serious offenses. Okay, and so when you do that, you have essentially just let everybody out of prison and you're just letting them roam around. And even folks in San Francisco have seen the impacts of that. Crime just goes boop, right to the moon, right? And yet the media will say, oh yeah, crime's down. What? Things are good. Hey, things are good. Well, why did my Starbucks just close? Why did my CVS just closed? Why did my drugstore just close? Well, everybody was robbing it blind and it's no longer safe to have it, open. Boudin, 39, spent decades visiting his parents in prison and as a result learned the ins and outs of the criminal justice system from a unique vantage point. Boudin's parents were getaway drivers in the attempted Brinks robbery in 1981 in New York, about 35 miles north of New York City. His mother, Kathy Boudin, pleaded guilty to murder and robbery and was imprisoned for more than 2 decades. His father, David Gilbert, is still behind bars after he was convicted of murder and robbery. Now, you can even see NBC News here. His parents did not fire a shot that day. The officers and the guard were killed by Black Liberation Army. Okay. Yeah, but they co-opted this, right? I mean, come on now. If you're there, you're guilty, right? Which was a partner with the Weather Underground and the attempted robbery to get money to finance their radical activities. They have since expressed regret for the deaths. So, you got Chesa Boudin, who lasted, a nanosecond as district attorney? He was so bad. The end result of his being in office and basically just not doing his job, which is prosecuting and convicting and incarcerating, trying to get, the bad guy incarcerated. He's too busy focusing on corporations. This is how the game is played. Let's focus on the big corporations. Remember? Price fixing, price gouging. Instead of actually dealing with the reality, which is San Francisco, another big town, city that is having a very difficult time with its comeback. Its downtown core is hollowed out. Number one, because we had the whole work from home thing, but then the streets basically aren't safe. And it's in California and they just let nut jobs run around that are on a lot of drugs. And gee whiz, who knew that big companies wouldn't want to go back into that kind of environment? So now you've got an office vacancy rate that is through the roof. Not only here in Seattle, same thing. Seattle, Portland, San Francisco. What's the common thread there? And you've got it in Republican-run cities as well, but not to the same extent. Not to the same extent, because in Republican-run cities, you don't have nut jobs like Chesa Boudin as district attorney. You've got people who actually, incarcerate people, actually go after the criminal element. They support law enforcement. They support public safety. Chesa Boudin does not support any of that. He's not the only one. You've had George Gascon. You've had, mayor of San Francisco, mayor of London Breed got tossed. You got the mayor of Oakland being indicted right now. I mean, these people support a lot of shady nonsense. And today's news story is just exactly how that goes. It's exactly how we knew it went, but it kind of places a face to the name, right? You see this USAID and you recognize, oh, okay, that's how that goes. They support some kind of big organization who doles out money. And when you hear these people that you think are, right-wing conspiracy theorists, the joke I say is, what's the difference between a right-wing conspiracy theory and the truth? And people are, I don't know, what? And you're like, about 6 months. And they're like, is that true? Is that all it takes? Doesn't matter what the time period is, right? The period, the thing is it goes from right-wing conspiracy theory to the truth. And somewhere in between, everybody just, ignore that one. Good Lord. Another one is the conspiracy theorists are 37 and 0, right? And 37 conspiracy theories and no losses because they all turn out to be true. One way or the other, they all turn out to be true. So all this notion of these far left groups benefiting from this mysterious funding, it's not mysterious funding. You funded them. I hope you enjoy that because I know I did. Yeah. I mean, you got money coming from all over into this. And it's no wonder that they're pushing back so hard. It's no wonder the Democrats are pushing back so hard against Doge going in and just basically stripping out funding from all this ridiculousness, because it's not only these ridiculous entities, it's so many others that we haven't even gotten into, we haven't even talked about. And none of them are right of center. Weird. That's weird, isn't it? Yeah. All right. That's it for me on this one. Thanks so much for being here. I'll catch up with you in the next one. Bye for now.